the big thing Western observers need to understand that Xi Jinping is not and has never been in this sort of position of absolute power. He was struggling with the Shanghai clique, the Jiang Zemin faction. We've been calling it for so long. Even after his death, that's ongoing with basically Jiang's right-hand man, Zheng Qinghong, still kind of leading the fray. And just with the economic troubles and popular resentment against Xi Jinping, this is kind of one of the reasons we've been analyzing that China likely won't start a war over Taiwan right now is that, that would require Xi Jinping putting somebody in charge of, China's joint command. And that would mean that person would become the most powerful person in China, and he would be enabling very likely a coup. And so Xi is kind of paralyzed. He can't do too much without undermining his own position. And, from what I've been hearing, like, he is not getting a lot of information from his people. People aren't executing his decisions very well. He's just becoming more and more isolated, even within the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, where the PLA is concerned, I completely agree. And how many times has he said, prepare for war? And you and I asked my cadets, what does that mean? They go, well, I mean, it's like, lock and load, pick up your rucksack and go fight. No, what he means when he says prepare for war is stop dabbling in expensive art, stop selling real estate, stop lining your pockets, stop selling your stuff to Burma. I mean, it is the most corrupt organization. I mean, I can statistically show you it's the most corrupt organization, the Chinese government.
The PLA, you mean?
The PLA. And when he says that, what he's saying is, I don't believe you can do anything that you claim to be able to do, right? That's clearly the message. And he keeps saying that, which tells you, is he really going to risk it all on Taiwan with an organization that hasn't really been challenged since, and even 1979 wasn't a real challenge. They haven't really been tested since the Civil War. So if I were him, he looks at the U.S. military and, we've been fighting nonstop for 30 years. I wouldn't even think about trying that. Remember, military activity with Taiwan, whether it's a blockade or an invasion or whatever, involves the risk of loss, if I use insurance or investment terms. If he loses, he's done. That's his neck. And so, we can still mess around in the information space, the economic space, legal, and all the rest with very low risk. When you start pulling triggers, the risk goes way up. And I don't think he's willing to accept it. Especially with the rocket force purges. Again, like, it was so strange because he was the one who basically elevated it to become a thing. It seemed like the most modernized, capable branch of the PLA. And then to suddenly purge top officials or top generals. It's really a bizarre thing. As a military guy, I can tell you, military people, even in the PLA, are very results oriented, right? Because you either win or you lose, you live or you die, compared to economics and others, which are longer term and more squishy, right? And so his own military, I'm sure, is watching these changes at that time and realizing they weren't really beneficial, probably threatening their own income and status, but also putting the PLA, the PRC security at risk. So you can imagine they would be one of the first groups to sit up and go, hey, boss, this is not a good idea. And as soon as you push back on an authoritarian system like that, you're disloyal and you need to be cashiered.
Do you think that the outcome of the 2024 election will affect Xi Jinping's calculus on whether or when to invade Taiwan?
Are you talking about Taiwan's 2024 election?
Or
the U.S.?
I actually meant the U.S., but we also should think about Taiwan. I guess there's really two questions there.
Well, Taiwan, I think so, but it just depends on how the campaign goes. Because if you've got, DPP coming out strongly on it and saying independence, they have said that would be a trigger, whether they get actually executed or not. Yeah, and I would think that the response would be incremental. I don't think the missiles would start flying right away. You would see something more akin to a blockade. Because again, there's a lot of risk in attempting to invade and then failing. And then let's go back to the whole problem with the Chinese military. The people in the U.S. volunteer for military service, like I did when I was 18 years old, because it's honorable and that we know the military is competent and it's a social elevator for you, right? And the military is still, one of the better meritocracies in the U.S. That's not how it's perceived in a one-child system country where you've got one kid and if it's wasted in some adventure on the Indian border or whatever, that's it. The Wong family is done. That family tree just left. And of course, in Confucian sense, military service is actually on the lowest end. There's no honor in that. So, the PLA is not getting the best and brightest. However, as the economy turns down, you're seeing a lot more interest in joining the government, the party, and I think you're going to see a lot more interest in more qualified people joining the PLA. But that won't have an effect for 10 to 20 years. So it's still basically the dregs, the people who couldn't survive, who couldn't get to Beida, who couldn't get into business and all the rest. And that's what we saw in dealing with the PLA as defense attaché.
Well, from your perspective, since you have a lot of experience with China, what do you think might happen if Xi Jinping is removed from power somehow? Because I know there's lots of people who want to go back to the way things were in like the 2000s, where it's still a Chinese Communist Party committing horrible human rights atrocities and still stealing American intellectual property, but just on the surface things get better. Some people can make money.
Well, I mean, it felt welcoming to foreign businesses because Jiang Zemin made a big effort.
They weren't getting arrested.
He was only killing the Tibetans and the Falun Gong. He wasn't arresting Western business people. So that it was like, So do you think that's likely to return to that era?
Yeah, I can't. I mean, look, those who forget their history are doomed to repeat it. Looking at how this has happened, not just in the Chinese sense, but in the Soviet sense, there's always this period of moderation after it gets just too weird. Mao and Deng Xiaoping was a part of that. Now, people remind me that Deng Xiaoping was no humanist. I mean, he was in every way a communist too, but he moderated the behavior of the CCP to the great joy of the Chinese people who weren't running through this cultural revolution mess, but to the West as well. All of a sudden, it was okay to make money, to get rich is glorious, and all the rest. So again, even Deng Xiaoping was not Saint Mother Teresa, but he was far better than his predecessor. And then this brings us to that Evan Osnos piece about the age of Malaise, which I thought was fantastic. I mean, there were some areas in there that you could argue, but overall, getting in there and talking to people in the PRC today to see how they're feeling, I'm hearing a lot of the same things. People are just fed up. But the security process, the security burden is so high that nobody really has the courage to say something, but they soon will, I believe, especially if they're given a green light. And as you saw during zero COVID, that was a green light. People said it's enough, we're done. And Xi Jinping had to back down from his very bad zero COVID idea. So again, if you haven't read that article by Evan Osnos, it's well worth the read.
Okay, so we can provide a link to it in the description. I'm sure he wouldn't mind. Yeah, and you mentioned zero COVID. Like that's another X factor that nobody really knows how it's affecting Xi Jinping or the Chinese Communist Party. Like we don't really know how many people in China died from COVID. They stopped publishing cremation stats.
We don't even know how the economy's doing. I mean, we have people investing in something they have no visibility on. Yeah, I mean, in that system, remember, it's easier and it's better to lie than to tell the truth, because if you tell the truth, you can be accused of revealing state secrets. And if you lie to inflate your data to match that of the 5-year plan. And so that line, that trajectory meets perfectly at 2022 or 2021, the first centenary goal, right? We doubled the income of the Chinese people. And it just magically happened to meet just perfectly, right? That's because they're making it up. And again, I don't understand why Wall Street doesn't do more to get real facts or demand real data. It's the same thing with COVID. There's going to be a reckoning on COVID. It's got to happen eventually to find out that, one, the World Health Organization enabled the pandemic by not declaring a public health emergency of an international consequence until March, by intentionally self-censoring where they looked and investigated, not demanding access to the Wuhan Institute. We have mechanisms in the international system, in the UN, to hold the PRC to account, but the PRC has subverted them to its own purposes, and we've got to say something and stop this. They're on the Human Rights Council right now. Can you believe that? They're committing genocide. We're inviting him to the U.S., a genocidal leader. We're inviting him to APEC next month. How is this not Neville Chamberlain? Peace in our time.